We are in this huge transition, and key for companies is to hire and to keep the right people with the right talents. It's all about diversity and inclusiveness. And I have two distinguished guests here to talk about this subject. The first one is Lisanne Brons, Microsoft. Introduce yourself briefly, Lisanne, and tell me what were the issues you were confronted with in the last year and a half with the whole corona crisis when it comes to these issues, diversity and inclusiveness at Microsoft?
That's a good question. Yeah, so at Microsoft I'm responsible for our modern workplace and our cybersecurity technology. But besides that, for the last couple of years, I've also been running our diversity and inclusion initiatives in the Netherlands. And I think if I look back on the last 1.5 years, I think it's putting additional strain on the topic of inclusion, especially since people are working remote. How do you still feel connected to your team and to your company? But also, how do we make sure that we don't people don't fall behind or we lose track of how it's really going with people. So I think those are new challenges that have come up with the last period. On the other hand, there's also opportunity when it comes to remote work and diversity and inclusion, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit.
Absolutely. Our second guest, Joost Jetten with Logitech here in the Netherlands. Introduce yourself and what were issues you were dealing with in the corona pandemic?
Responsible for enterprise and mainly responsible for the video collaboration part of Logitech, which is actually the products that most of us now more and more using.
The stuff we're using here.
The stuff we're using today. And as Logitech we have always had that possibility and opportunity to work from home and to work from anywhere where we wanted. And that's indebted in our culture. And what we also saw, of course, in the last 1.5, 2 years almost, as we see the COVID, of course, continuing, as we call it, is that the use of video is also helping to keep the people closer to the company and closer to themselves. So the usage of video is also having a communication tool, but also having a tool of getting people towards each other, even in times when you're not seeing each other.
Yeah. In a situation like this, Joost, I mean, people say, under pressure everything becomes fluid eventually.
Yeah.
Do things really become fluid when it comes to hiring people, keeping people, having the right talent? Do things really radically change since Corona and since COVID?
No, radically change. Yes, I believe so. I think there is a different way of looking at assets and looking at the way we work. I also look at the way we hiring people. I think Logitech has hired the most people in the last year, and they haven't seen an office or the person that they hired physically, because it was not possible all over the world. So we have hired people by video.
Our younger son, he's 26, lives and works in New York, has a new job at Pharma Packs, and he never met anybody, and he works for them full time.
And that is actually the case. So not even the employee, but also not your co-workers. So you see your co-workers on video, and then when we had the opportunity to at least come somewhere together, and sometimes in the offices of Microsoft when the possibility was there, and people saying, and people continue talking. So the thing is when you're meeting old friends, you always continue talking. At the same time, when you did a lot of video calls together, you continue talking. So it means that video has an impact on at least keeping the bond, but it's of course different than meeting each other in real life.
Sounds familiar, I guess, right?
Super familiar, yeah. And I think video is very powerful. At the same time, we both work for technology companies. I think if you want, you can solve a lot of things. We've proven over the last 1.5, 2 years that people don't become less productive, even if they're working from home. Actually, we've seen people going above and beyond, maybe working even harder than before.
There was an international survey out the other day about engagement of employees, crucial for companies having engaged employees, and engagement was up. Instead of down, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, but an interesting one is that we found in our research that the engagement is up, especially on a team level. And I've experienced that as well with my team. We've been, since the beginning, it was like, this is a stressful time, let's support each other, how can I help?
Stay close to each other.
How can we stay close? On the other hand, we see connection to the maybe the teams that are a bit further away from you. We see that going down. So if we look at connections to other parts of the company, people have less interactions.
There's no water cooler talk anymore.
Exactly.
You meet people you never met, and interesting to meet you. Right?
Yeah.
But also the big events. So we know from Microsoft and also from Logitech perspective is that you always have these big events to start up the year. We have ISE, we have Ignite, Inspire.
Yeah.
So 20,000 people are there, and serendipity is something really great.
Take them all to Hawaii for 3 days,
right? No, but also even go to Amsterdam or even go to Barcelona.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be always Hawaii. At the same time, you're meeting people because you want to be connected there, and you meet the people, and then you create business or you create friendships and etc. And I think that part is missing. And I completely agree with you. Is that the teams that are working together in a matrix or all kind of forms that you have, getting closer, and you see that you get a little bit less, maybe you call it the mothership, that continues, but you don't have the interaction because once a year, twice a year, you got that vibe of belonging to something bigger, and you need to be careful about the fact if you're working for big international companies, you want to be part of something bigger that you connect that.
And I think it's a threat for two things, right? Like you said, one, it's a connection to the all-up company, maybe to the purpose or the mission of your company. It's very focused on the task that your team has to do. And the second thing is innovation. The creativity sometimes also flows from meeting different people and going outside of your own line of work, having that cross collaboration kind of going. And I think in this world it's not impossible to achieve that, but it's something that we need to rethink in the remote setup or in the hybrid setup.
Because I mean, is that a problem? I mean, everybody talks about productivity, and productivity, what I read from all kinds of surveys, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's all about also
balance.
in a tech company, very much about creativity. It's tomorrow's products or the day after tomorrow. I mean, in order to survive in the long run, you guys have to be creating and come up with solutions that we haven't thought up yet.
Yeah.
But it has also examples of a specific product we created with other vendors in cooperation with, trying to make a hybrid classroom, and we were all, of course, faced by the fact that our children had to stay home and came home. And I saw my daughter, she's now 17, at that time 16, was lying in her bed and following classes. And that was my example. So how can we do? This is not possible. And we had other parents sitting in other companies were saying, okay, let's have something. What can we build? What can we do about it? So we got together, and we had a very, very direct meeting schedule. So every Tuesday or every Wednesday we had like a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock call all together, and everybody enjoyed it. And when you went eventually into Workstream, and everybody found it very nice. And said, actually, we're missing that. Can we just put it back that hour of different people talking about a topic and driving something really? And it was all done by video, and it came all out. And eventually we said, okay, we have to make it because it's.
So you're not too worried about the lack of creativity that I was talking about?
Not. I think in the beginning, yes, but in the time where we're developing in our environment, we're developing so much more possibilities, especially in creativity, that video and the total concept of creativity happening is that the engineers, which we all have, has also been focused on, okay, this is a world that's going to stay. So if we are not coming to the office or cannot be able to come to the office, we have to still keep that creativity process going. And this is where the change is now coming. So we take out of this crisis going forward, we take complete different ways of communication and way of how keep inclusiveness also available for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's also about we're adapting to this new way of working, right? Yeah. And I think it's funny if you look at it in the beginning when the pandemic started, what we saw was that every meeting became the online meeting. Drinks on Friday became online Friday drinks, and the brainstorm of 3 hours became a 3-hour online brainstorm. And I think now we're really getting to a phase where people are more like, okay, 3 hours online. I'm not sure if that's the best way to brainstorm with this setup. The Friday night drinks, I'm happy on Friday that I can close the laptop
switch off.
and switch off, you know. So then it feels like almost an additional. I'm not enjoying it, so it's not meeting the purpose. And I think now, I've already the last year, I think the first 6 months was very much, okay, we flip the switch and we just recreate it in the online world.
And it took a while, I guess, for a lot of people, also for managers in big companies, to realize that this is not a temporary thing.
No.
Yeah.
This is left or right, it's a permanent transformation, a permanent, I would say, revolution, right? Is it a revolution?
I think so. I think for me it's very fascinating. We've never embarked on such a huge worldwide experiment when it comes to doing work.
I think it's just as big as when we put internet into our minds, into our things. I think it's just as big.
Our 3 kids, they work out of London, New York and San Francisco, which is quite a treat for parents when you can visit them. But when I call them, thank you FaceTime, first of all. Secondly, I'm no longer asking them, how are you doing?
We can
the first
upgrade
thing
you.
I'm
We can upgrade you.
from which time zone are you working today?
Yeah.
Right? Because they still travel.
Yeah.
And they still work like, it's totally natural.
The balancing act is in the beginning when you have your work times, let's call it go to an office, and differs from cultures and companies, but you have to go to office and suddenly you're not going to office anymore. So the feel of leaving out is suddenly in people's minds, okay, but my manager or the middle management always has issues on that specifically more because they're closer to the teams, as you earlier explained. And I think that's where that has changed, because now with the interaction of specifically video, because before switch your video on was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because the adoption of video was not really, no, not on video.
And people were uncomfortable.
Now people
it's
are
my
just
privacy.
People are now sitting in their own room and they have this is my work room and they have all the things there. And this is my daughter. This is my okay, great, okay.
That's
let's
my
continue.
dog walking in.
Yeah,
right?
and my dog walks in and the children come in and suddenly it becomes a very natural environment. And I think that's one of the things why things are productive and people get engaged. I think the companies and ourselves as managers have the obligation also to be very careful about that. And because Logitech is a company that does these way of working, we also had a Logi Thank You Day, so that the company gave 1 day back every month that we could spend on free time, because they said you have to do that. And when employees were coming back to the company and say, or to the leadership of the company and saying, yeah, but 1 day a month, and maybe we should, okay, let's do it differently. Let's give you 2 days a quarter, which is of course a good very good trade-off. But do it Thursday, Friday. So on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have a long weekend every quarter from Logitech, and nobody works. There is nobody who sends an email, and nobody comes into that because the whole company is closed.
Blacked off. Done.
Blacked off. And of course, there are some functions and everything that carries on sometimes.
Of course,
most
service, whatever.
Most of the 8,500, 9,000 employees switch off. And that also gives a very comfortable feeling, because most of the work we do is within our own peers.
And it's a huge perk for particularly young people who want more private time, who want more balanced private work, right?
Yeah, correct.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about hiring and keeping the right people.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys work for companies that are popular, I guess, among young people. I mean, I know banks and oil companies have a really hard time to hire young people. You guys are popular. You're a tech company, you're innovative, people
nice
know
people.
you. Huh?
Nice people.
Of course, very nice people. But is it a challenge for Microsoft to hire and keep the right people?
Well, you're taking my point, but I think if you look at diversity, inclusion and hiring, we've learned a lot over the last decade. So I think we're in a pretty good state. We're able to attract the right talent. We've really changed our hiring process to really more what we call qualify out versus qualify in. So before we were thinking always like, okay, you need university degree. So when we go through resumes, that's you can shift and you can. Now we're more thinking, okay, qualifying in. Does this person, do we feel he or she could do this job? And what might be reasons of concerns, or what might, then we can investigate that, right? So it's a different way of looking at it. And also to your point earlier, this is also helping us to attract people who don't necessarily come from tech, to bring in new perspectives, and to increase our diversity on many different angles. It's not only men and women.
No.
But coming to your point, it's keeping the talent is, I think, where we're always still learning. This can be a challenge. Because it also really relates, does someone feel at home? Do they feel included? Do they feel they can do what they like and so on? So those are different topics, and I think over the last decade we realized that we need to put more emphasis on that part as well.
Does it work out?
I'm honest, right? So it's not like we're not where we want to be on that part.
It is a huge transition.
It's a huge thing, yeah. And we see that the role of the manager is really crucial in this. So creating that inclusive kind of team culture, also helping people, especially young people. I don't know if you've heard about the imposter syndrome, but people might think, what am I doing here? Why did they hire me? I'm not sure if I can do this role. And it's the manager that is the key to making sure that they go through that first kind of first 1.5 years. And we see if they get through that, then they will stay with the company. But if they don't have a good experience within that phase, then the more diverse talents are at risk of then stepping out.
But it has to be, it has to turn out to be some kind of a match between the company and these new employees.
I think it's more about feeling at home and feeling that you're valued for your skills and attracting diversity. I think that's also the key difference between diversity and inclusion is we're a target-driven company. So if you say diversity, we put a number on it and then we go, so we fix that. Yeah. But that's the easy part, know, and it's more about culture, about atmosphere, about recognition, and those are much harder things. There's no one way to do that. Yeah,
different world for you guys as a manager, right?
Yes. And echoing some of the parts, but of course, cultural-wise, we are Swiss American and American by nature from Microsoft. So you have that culture in you. I think one of the biggest changes we saw is by naming it. So from human resource to people and culture. So human resource, the old naming. Before that, it was the Dutch word I cannot say in English. Personeelszaken, that's it. So, and then you move from HR, human resource, and then you move to people and culture. I think the lying is there, the wording is in
At Airbnb they call it talent, which is a different approach for the same thing.
It's actually almost, it's always the same thing, because you know what you mean. It always gives a dimension on what you want to be, and I think if you have a diversified approach in your market, so we have different brands under the Logitech brand, we have different ways of how we're bringing products to market. We have a business product, we have consumers, we have gamers, we have everything. So if you fit the culture or the people inside, of course, the categories that you live, because we sell products, that's what we do, or solutions. So it means that you have to have the people there that are connected to those products. So if you have age or gender or whatever you want to do, adding to a certain product line, they normally don't get it, because on gaming you talk a different language, on streamers and creators you talk a different language than in video collaboration. So I think fitting the right culture and the people towards the categories that you're selling, I think that's one part. I think the other part is, of course, how diversified your teams are that bringing those products to market. And that is, of course, the way how you look at your society and your culture, and you want to have the best mix of everything, because that's where you strengthen each other. Yeah. And I think that's the same thing in life. And what we see is that people are attracted by the CEO, the way that your CEO, our CEO
role
speaks
model,
out,
right?
makes a role model, makes his statements about black empowerment, makes statements about female, makes really strong statements about how do you want to be as a company, and how you want to be the people to treat each other, how we talk about mentorship, everything is like sort of guided. And then you, of course, need to filter that down. And that's the difficult part, because on top there, it's fine. But then you go down, and if you go more and more down, how can you then elaborate on the
Yeah.
way the culture is changing?
But maybe also to make it more personal, when I started at Microsoft, I was in a technical team. I have a technical background, and I was the first woman on the team. I was also the youngest on the team, and I saw a lot of people around me that didn't look like me. I also didn't, I was not really okay, am I in the right place, right? Those are questions you're going to ask yourself. And also very important, especially with younger talent, I was very ambitious. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to make some steps in the first years that I was with the company. And you see, okay, but they are doing it in a certain style that will never be my style, right? So I am never going to do exactly what they do. However, maybe I can do the role or the job.
So what is the biggest change you've seen over the years? How many years have you been with Microsoft?
10.
And what would be the biggest change you've seen when it comes to these issues?
Well, the shift from diversity to inclusion, from how we look at it. But I think the other thing is this. I was the first one. And yes, we're still, if you look at female, there's more men working at Microsoft than women. But it's about sometimes being the first, right? And then you put a lot of pressure on people. If it's a second or a third, then people are more like, hey, okay, majority is white men, whatever you want to... that can be the case, yeah. But as soon as it starts to diversify, people say, okay, but not everyone is not one format. Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part also for other organizations, because it's those first who will also fail, who will also feel miserable at times, who will also maybe leave. So going over that kind of first bump of diversifying your teams is crucial.
Because it's also, we live, here in Holland and in the US and in a lot of countries with a very tight labor market, which is quite unusual after the economic crisis we had. First, when the pandemic started, everybody thought, oh my, the sky is falling down. And no, the sky did not fall down. No. We have a very tight labor market, so it gets harder and harder for you guys. Yeah. Even in companies like yours that are in a strong position in the labor market, it must be tough.
Yeah, but it has to be the full story. And I think the full story is about, first question, can I work from home? And the people that are now coming to the market and youngsters with
it's no longer can have a lease car, but
no, it's firstly, can we work from home and can we balancing out our lives? So if you talk about that specific age, I think the other part is, of course, what is your company doing? And it's not making the greatest product, but what do you actually do with the product?
What do you add?
What do you add with the product? Are you taking the products back after 5, 6, 7 years? So the whole concerning about what we are as a world today is much more important for that, and it's getting very important for all of us. But they are much more concerned about that fact too, and if the company is really adding to that. And
so these young employees are a driving force, like you described, are a driving force behind this change.
Yeah, definitely, because that is basically always been the case. When you joined Microsoft, you also changed that. When I joined at that time a distributor in Snake, it was also because you have that drive to put that flag somewhere, and in time and in age you turn that a little bit, you're getting a bit milder, and you seeing it a little bit more in perspective. But I think definitely when a company wants to drive innovations and that fits to a lifestyle or a way that we work, you want to hire the best talents. And I always, my personal mantra was always like, hire the best people. And it doesn't matter how they look like and what they are, because they have to contribute to the success that we all want to have together. I think if people say that, it's not always true, because they always do that because of the stereotyping of their company. So it's very challenging if you hire, for instance, in our personal case, I hired 2 ladies completely not out of the business. Took them in the business because we also had to be a challenger in this market.
So what were their skills? I mean, they're working in a tech company, you guys...
No skills, they had to learn everything about even what a mouse and a keyboard was. What can it do? What is Microsoft? Why is Microsoft important to Logitech's video collaboration? All these basic things why don't they know that? Yeah. Because they know, but they knew other things, and if they learn.
So what do they add to the company? I mean, what are the skills of these ladies?
Now, if you're going through all the phases, you are perceived better than anybody else because you are a role model, because you learned it in the way out. Secondly, they have other skills that convince people, because we're talking about a complete different way. It's now a part of working. It's not a technical thing anymore. So when everything going to be adopted, technology should work for us. It's not like that we have to understand how that is being connected, how that router is working. It's like you're putting a plug in there and the light goes on. Now that's the same thing when you want to do, in our case, a video call.
And I have a great example of that as well. Last 4 years I managed a technical team of 22 people. And we hired in the beginning a lady with a communications background. Mm-hmm. And in tech, and you probably recognize this, is a lot of times you're being recognized for how much you know. It's a very, people in tech are usually very knowledgeable, and a certain expertise gives you a certain status. Yeah. And I think, when I hired this lady, she had also very limited tech experience, a little bit more than I guess what you described. But she did awesome, because she was maybe getting to 80% of the knowledge, but she was way better at transferring that knowledge to customers, for example, and how she talked about it. And therefore, it made us also rethink, hey, we're always setting the bar on, you need to at least have this exam and know this and so on. But actually, is that the best way or the only way that you can become successful in tech? And she really proved not. But back to my earlier point, there was a lot of convincing to the team why we hired her, right? You need to put in a lot of, people are, okay, I've always succeeded in my role because I know so much, and you're hiring someone who I don't really understand brings anything to the table. So again, the manager needs to really have the active dialogue, but she brings other things, and this is the reason, and back it up. There is no one way to do it, and so on.
Agree? Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's also, to me, diversity. If you are in a tech world where all these techies are talking about these technical stuff, I'm also not a technical person. I knew nothing from video collaboration when I joined Logitech. Actually, what, and I come.
But you're smart enough to learn quickly.
But smart enough to understand how the things are working,
and
have the learning mindset, and being curious about how can we change it. And the great example was always because we had to move into an industry that was dominated by very technical skill set, with people that never used the product, but it was very complicated, and that's why people never used it. Yeah. And we made it simpler. And then you need simple people just to make it work.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you also still need the experts, right? So I don't think it's also in the messaging that is not a profile that will go away, but we're adding different flavors.
Add it to it and make that into like you make a team. You have different skill sets and functionalities, and you put that together, and you have a common goal and a vision, or vision and a goal. And then, you can move forward with that.
In closing, back to the issue of diversity and inclusiveness. Where are we 5 years from now, Joost?
On that specific
What's going to be
topic?
the biggest change in the next 5 years? It's a little crystal ball, but look at the crystal ball.
Yeah. I'll take the tomorrow most of the time. But
tomorrow is a long time, right?
Tomorrow's already a long time. But I think in 5 years from here is. I think we will look at work as a much more, and I really mean knowledge workers, because other work, but specifically people in what the way we business. I think that we will have a very digital way of working. Video will be imperative, will be used more and more everywhere. Also create that inclusion that people can work, live anywhere they want, and just log in and be connected. I think that will be a big trend and a big thing happening. So it will also equalizes work over the continent. So you can sit in South Africa and you can work for a Dutch company, but never have visited, and maybe even have that not equal most of the time, but a sort of a paycheck that also gives you a better life on that side of the world. So I think it will equalize out. Competition will be more worldwide continuously, because the technology is there to really support that way of living. And I think in that care, I think we will have much more feeling and also touch about the world around us, that we really think, okay, should we really do that? Can we not see it work differently? And then we care a little bit more about the world around us, which we all need, because otherwise we don't have an extra planet anymore.
What about you, Lisanne, 5 years from now?
I don't know what...
She will be.
She
will be for a bit.
Yeah. So I would like to what do I wish for the world in 5 years? I cannot look into the future. Yeah, I think it's even in the way that you put it, the challenge of diversity and inclusion. I hope we can get to a state where we see it as an opportunity, and we really switch from this phase, which is needed, where we talk about differences, where we sometimes still think too much in labels, in categories, and so on, that we really make the shift in the world to talk about inclusion, and that it becomes of everyone. Because I think everyone is different. So it's not one group or one challenge to tackle. It should become something that's inevitable to think about for everyone. And I hope that people will start to feel that, and companies as well. Then we're in a good place, I think.
Fascinating times. Thank you, Joost. Thank you, Lisanne. And thank you for joining us for this meeting. Thank you so much.